Hey, what's going on, guys, and welcome back to another Fallout 4 modding video. Today, we're checking out a brand new weapon mod by Elixirator known as the Homestead Carbine, an early game 9mm carbine based on the real-life Henry Homesteader, with some tweaks to, of course, make it fit a little bit more in Fallout, and of course, just have some different changes made to it to fit with animations and other things. And of course, a ton of really cool new customization options thanks to Fallout 4's weapon workbench. Now, the reason I wanted to cover this in its own video today is because I think this is a very important release. First of all, it's one of the few 9mm carbines that I know exist, so as a standalone release, it's already quite cool. We've been wanting a 9mm carbine for a long time, and I can't think of any that really fit the bill, at least in a lore-friendly way, and with this sort of rifle format. Technically, I have a 9mm carbine, but it's not quite like this. Now, the other reason I think this is very important is not just for standalone releases, but because I think, and if you've read the title, you already know, I think this is a perfect replacer for the combat rifle. Many people have tried to make combat rifle replacers using existing mods on the Nexus, including my own, some of them being replacers using existing weapons, or some of them being remeshes like my remeshes to try to make the combat rifle a little bit more approachable. And sadly, none of those ever work out quite how I want them to. But now we have an early game carbine that fits the general vibe of the combat rifle even better than the vanilla one did itself. This is a weapon that uses a pistol caliber magazine and is in the style of a full-length rifle with wood furniture split across the stock and the forestock. It is essentially a combat rifle by description, but it looks so much better and fits way more than the vanilla one. As you know, the vanilla combat rifle's biggest issue is that it uses 308 magazines and it's chambered in 45. That's just absurd. So while this version of the gun in standalone is a 9mm, I would absolutely love to see a patch that maybe makes it 45. All of you anti-munitions people are usually really quick to patch this thing, and there already is a non-munitions patch out there. Sadly, it is in 38. I think if somebody made a patch for this in 45 and then used that to replace the combat rifle, this may be the perfect combat rifle replacer. Elixirator, if you're listening to this, or I should just probably send you a message, that's something you should really get onto, and I think people will like it quite a lot. I think this is definitely an opportunity to make probably the pinnacle of combat rifle replacers. And I think Elixirator is kind of already aware of that because they actually have combat rifle furniture in their own mod. So if they don't do it themselves, I highly recommend somebody get out there and make a 45 replacer for the combat rifle. Until then, though, this thing is going to be a 9mm standalone that requires munitions, and I will be covering it for the rest of the video as such. But I just really cannot stress enough how much I think this would be the pinnacle of 45 combat rifle replacers. It has the exact right shape. Everything about it fits that bill perfectly. So if somebody wants to get on that, I think that's a really good idea, and there's a potential there to have a pretty big audience looking for something like that. Now then, as for the weapon as it comes right now, maybe you don't want a combat rifle replacer. Maybe you just want this weapon as is for even more variety in your game. Well, let's talk about what exactly is offered and what would technically be offered even if it was a replacer. This thing is going to be added to the leveled list, of course, which is always a wonderful touch. This thing spawns after level 7 in its current configuration, but using 9mm, of course, from munitions. In its current version, it will require munitions. However, there is already a non-munitions version out there in 38, and who knows, maybe after this video sometime soon we'll get something in 45. As for the leveled list, it does spawn on raiders, gunners, minutemen, and you can of course purchase it from vendors, or if you're lucky, find it as a legendary drop. Now sadly, this weapon does not have a unique version. This is only going to appear as is, which is kind of a shame. I always like to see fun uniques, but this weapon has so much customization, I think it makes up for it there by allowing you to make some pretty dang unique versions of this weapon with the different attachments over at the weapons workbench, which there are a lot of. Another great feature of this weapon is that it does have custom animations. You may remember a while back I made a Ruger pack with 2 rifles. That was a Ruger 22 and a Ruger 44 with animations that were a nice little mishmash of Bones and Reds' talent. And so far, my mod was the only mod to have those animations, but Alex has repurposed those to use for this weapon, and I'd say that it fits pretty dang well. I think it's a pretty good adaptation, and it's nice to see it in a bigger caliber than 22. Functionally, in its standalone version, this is a really nice early game semi-auto rifle, essentially the combat rifle of the early game, which is pretty interesting. Despite making use of pistol calibers, this thing is still going to be pretty competent at range and have even more attachments to make it even better there. It is going to be semi-auto only. It does not have any full auto options, but that of course can change if you want to modify it yourself. But until then, it's going to be pretty much the perfect little 9mm semi-auto carbine. There are definitely more details that need to be covered though, starting off with its stats, and then we'll go ahead and check out some of the custom animations, and of course show off all of the wonderful attachments that Alexarator has made for this weapon. So let's go ahead and jump in game and start checking those out. So here we are in game with the Homestead Carbine. This thing is going to have a base damage of 22 when you download it standalone. Of course, mine does not reflect that because of some perks I have, as well as some other damage modifier mods I have installed. But when you download it on its own, it is going to have a base damage of 22. Again, using 9mm from munitions, has a fire rate of 33 in semi-automatic, a range of 305, an accuracy of 73, a weight of 11.5 pounds, and a value of 97 caps. And altogether, we have a really nice looking rifle here, something that looks like it fits in Fallout perfectly. Wood furniture, nice hard steel. I really do like the design of this weapon. It is based on a real life carbine, but with some modifications to make it fit a little bit better in Fallout, which I think is nice. What's really cool too is that this thing has the options for a flush magazine thanks to the animation set. So if you have a short magazine, it is going to be flush with the weapon, which makes for a pretty cool profile, but that can extend out further with attachments at the weapon's workbench. Another thing that I would like to commend while we're looking at the weapon preview here is all of the different options that Alexarator has made for this thing to make some really, really cool variants. Here we have sort of a sniper rifle configuration. We have a pretty standard upgraded configuration here with some heavier furniture, a nice scope. And there's even a really interesting stealth variant that I made here with some of the crazier attachments over at the weapon's workbench. The amount of customization options is very, very nice, and that's the kind of stuff I really like to see from modders. So keep up the good work, Alex. This is some really cool stuff. Now then, let's go ahead and check out animations for this thing. Since it does make use of those Ruger animations, I think that they work pretty well. Let's go ahead and see what they look like with the flush magazine. You'll have to ignore that little audio glitch there. And then here are the iron sights. They are a bit small, but definitely very functional. And in terms of accuracy, this thing is pretty dang accurate. Even though those iron sights are pretty small, it allows you to get a pretty pinpoint picture on whatever you're shooting at. Even this little tiny target here is able to be hit very easily. So, good stuff by Alex. This is some really, really cool adaptations of these animations, and altogether a pretty nice model for a new carbine for Fallout 4. Now, since we have no uniques to talk about, we're going to be going straight over to the weapon attachments, and some of you may skip out on this part, but I highly recommend sticking around if you're into cool customization options, because there's a lot to be discovered here. The receivers are pretty standard. We have standard all the way up through advanced, with a few extras added in, like optimized, oiled, and aligned, which are added by Alex himself for some more variation in what you can achieve with this weapon. For barrels, we have the standard barrel, a short barrel, which is basically snub. We have an extended barrel, which is going to give you a bit more range. We have a shrouded barrel, which is going to be a very interesting one. You may think that this is a suppressed barrel, but it is not. It's just a very, very heavy barrel that gives you better recoil. However, you can pair it with a suppressor later that will give a flush sort of appearance that will make it basically an extended version of this barrel with a nice, huge suppressor. We'll talk about that in a second. Then we have the combat barrel, which is very clearly inspired by the combat rifle. It's almost like Alex knew that this thing was a combat rifle, and it's another reason why I think this makes a perfect replacer. You could have this thing spawn with these configurations, but have it be customizable to have all of the other configurations. And then, of course, there's one more barrel. We have the marksman barrel, which is going to have a nice little bit of weight added to the bottom, which is also a mounting point for this new bipod, which makes for a pretty cool little option here for those of you who want to make this thing a better weapon for shooting at range. For furniture, we have the standard wood furniture. We have comfort furniture, which adds a different color of wood and some leather here on the front, as well as a nice big pad on the back. We have light furniture, which is just going to recolor it to black polymer. We have heavy furniture, which is going to add a big butt pad to the back here and some interesting little heat shield on top of the barrel. We then have combat furniture, which is going to be used with that combat barrel, which has the sort of ribbing of the combat weapons in the vanilla game, and as well as a nice butt pad on the back. And then we have the marksman furniture, which should go with that marksman barrel, which has a nice little grip here, and then a nice cheek rest on the back, and some cool looking dark wood, which is different from any of the other furnitures we've seen so far. Then we have magazine options. We have the standard flush magazine, an extended magazine for more ammo capacity, and then quick eject versions of both of those, which actually do change the model and add a nice little loop on the bottom there to imply easier grabability for these attachments. Grabability is a new patented word. That's mine. You cannot have that. And now we have the sight section where we have the standard iron sights, a set of glow sights, which is going to add a nice ring, a set of improved sights, which is going to be a bit different here at the back, as well as a glow version of those sights as well, which adds a nice V shape. We have a laser sight, which has that functional laser aiming. We have a reflex sight, a short scope, a medium scope, a long scope, and a short night vision scope, which even has its own model, which is always nice to see. A medium night vision scope, a long night vision scope, and then even a recon scope, which also has its own model, which is really nice. That comes in short and long. And I have to say, I think this is a really, really cool model. Pretty dang neat. And finally, that gives us the muzzle category. We have the option for no muzzle, a compensator, a muzzle brake, which is a pretty interesting muzzle brake design, a nice big heavy one, even though this is a pretty low caliber. We have a flash hider, a muzzle booster, which is typically going to be better for full auto weapons, but hey, you went ahead and threw that on here anyways. A suppressor, and a heavy suppressor, which is the one I was talking about earlier. If you combine this with the big shrouded barrel, you have a pretty interesting sci-fi looking weapon, which I think is super cool. Would have been nice to see this as a unique maybe, but instead we have it available as an attachment, which is nice enough as it is. So yeah, I think I've been yapping enough already. That's going to wrap it up for the Homestead Carbine, a really, really cool 9mm option. Again, something that I think would be a really wonderful combat rifle replacer. We'll have to see if somebody gets on that and properly integrates this thing as a replacer that also properly replaces all of the uniques. That's a pretty hard thing to do, so if somebody can get on that, that would be amazing. But until then, we have a really nice standalone weapon. Whether you like this thing in its 9mm configuration or you want to rechamber it to something non-munitions, I still think this is a wonderful carbine for Fallout 4. We don't see too many of those. A proper pistol caliber rifle, this is something that I think is very, very neat. So good job to Alex. He was working on this one for quite a while, and I think that work paid off. If you'd like to try it out for yourself, it will be linked down in the description below as always. It is currently on PC. I'm not sure if it has an Xbox port quite yet. With that, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, consider dropping it a like, and if you want to support the work that I do here on YouTube or the mods I make on Nexus, you can consider checking out my link in the description below to check me out over on Patreon. It's a nice option if you want to support me directly, however, it is of course completely optional. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace!